And the thing, too, is Noah is actually a pretty decent incarnation of the Spirit of the Father, which I suppose is one of the things that makes Ham's misstep more egregious, is that, I mean, Noah just built an ark and got everybody through the flood, man, you know. It's not so bad. And so maybe the fact that he happened to drink too much wine one day wasn't enough to justify humiliating him. And, you know, I don't think it's pushing the limits of symbolic interpretation to note on a daily basis that we're all contained in an ark, right? And that's the ark that, you could think about that as the ark that's been bequeathed to us by our forefathers. That's the tremendous infrastructure that we inhabit, that we take for granted, because it works so well, that protects us from things that we can't even imagine, and we don't have to imagine because we're so well protected. And so one of the things that's really struck me hard, I would say, about the disintegration and corruption of the universities is the absolute ingratitude that goes along with that. You know, criticism, as I said, is a fine thing if it's done in the spirit, in a proper spirit. And that's the spirit of separating the wheat from the chaff. But it needs to be accompanied by gratitude. And it does seem to me that anyone who lives in the West, in the Western culture at this time in history and in this place, and who isn't simultaneously grateful for that is half blind, at least, because it's never been better than this. And it could be so much worse. And it's highly likely that it will be so much worse, because for most of human history, so much worse is the norm. So, then there's this little story that crops up that seems in some ways unrelated to everything that's gone before it. But I think it's also an extremely profound little story. It took me a long time to figure it out. It's the Tower of Babel. And it came to pass, as they journeyed from the east, that they found a plain in the land of Shinar and dwelt there. That's Noah's descendants. And the whole earth was of one language and of one speech. And it came to pass, as they journeyed from the east, that they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. And they said to one another, "Go, let us make brick and burn them thoroughly." And they had brick for stone, and slime they had for mortar. So they're establishing a city. And they said, "Go, let us build a city and a tower whose top may reach unto heaven, and let us make a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the earth." And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of men built. And the Lord said, "Behold, the people is one, and they all have one language, and now this they begin to do. And now nothing will be restrained from them which they have imagined to do. Go to, let us go down and there confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech." So the Lord scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of all the earth, and they left off to build the city. Therefore is the name of it called Babel, because the Lord did there confound the language of all the earth, and from thence did the Lord scatter them abroad upon the face of all the earth. It's a very difficult story to understand. On the face of it, it doesn't seem to show God in a very good light, although that happens fairly frequently in the Old Testament, as far as I can tell. But, you know, the thing to do, if you're reading in the spirit of the text, let's say, is to remember that it's God that you're talking about. And so, even though you might think that he's appearing in a bad light, your duty as a reader, I suppose, is to assume that you're wrong and that what he did was right. And then you're supposed to figure out, well, how could it possibly be right? Because the axiomatic presupposition is that it's God and whatever he does is right. And you might say, well, you can disagree with that. And it's also the case that some of the people that God talks to in the Old Testament actually disagree with him and convince him to alter his actions. But the point still remains that it's God, and if he's doing it, then by definition, there's a good reason.